So I was sitting there like, can't believe I'm gonna share this. And then I heard God say, let me ask you a question, because I'm just wondering. Can you relate? I'm the type of person where I have to run through a mental checklist before I cry. I gotta stop myself. Like as soon as I feel that tear right here, gotta stop. Can you relate? Hey there, my name is Kashayla. Thank you so much for clicking on. If you want to know more about the channel and these videos, please see the behind the channel video, because the Lord gave me some verses and some scripture and I'm ready to get into it. Okay. On a serious note, okay, the other day, hold on. Okay, the other day I was going through it, girl. I felt so depressed, but I didn't want to label it depression because it didn't feel like the depression I had when I took pills. I don't know how to say that. So it's not funny. So I was feeling horrible and I was trying to be productive, but I couldn't. I tried to rest. I couldn't. I didn't want to read my Bible again. I didn't want to watch any sermons. I didn't want to watch any podcasts because I knew that the Lord was there with me. And that's just what I kept trying to tell myself. And it wasn't working. And I was like, Lord, like, help. But at the same time, I wasn't really wanting to tell him how I felt, because I was to reach out to him, but I didn't really want to tell him how I felt because I felt like I was kind of being disrespectful, or I was being unappreciative of all the things that are around me. Like I'm looking around, I'm doing fine, but I just don't feel fine. And that's what I started telling him. And every time I would start to cry, but I'd stop myself from crying. And I'd say, okay, Lord, like, I know you're here. I know that you're more than a feeling. I would just run through it. So I ended up watching a sermon. I got a message out of that. 5 minutes later, I'm smacked with the feeling again. I'm like, Lord. Then I'm like, all right, let me watch a podcast, because I tried to work, but I couldn't. Like, I tried to rest. I couldn't rest. I tried to be productive. I couldn't be productive. I like literally was picking up my fingers, going to type, but my mind don't know where it was. I mean, it was still in there, but you know. And so I try to talk to myself and say, okay, you can never spend too much time with the Lord. So it's fine that you're, or learning about the Lord. So it's fine that this is what you're doing. You'll be okay. So I did that, and then I felt a little better, and then I was smacked with the feeling again. So I'm like, Lord, help me. I'm sorry. Like, I know that you're working on it. I know that you're working on all the things I prayed over. In period, I just know that you got me. But I don't feel good, and I need to feel you. And just as I started to feel him, I started to cry, and then I stopped myself. And the Lord said, you don't trust me. And I said, yes, I do trust you. Like, of course I trust you, Lord. Like, look at these circumstances that I'm in. Like, I trust you. And he's like, okay, yeah, like, you trust me here, here, and here, but you don't trust me here. You don't trust me with your emotions. You don't trust me with your heart. He said, I am God, your father, not your earthly father. And then that's when he showed me all these scenarios and things that I've been through in my life, and where I picked up my distrust. And then I learned that emotions were a tool for manipulation, to where I didn't even trust my own emotions. For instance, last year I found out that my grandmother was dying while I was at work, and I go to a coworker and I'm like, let me tell you what just happened. Is it normal that I feel like I'm gonna cry? Am I acting right now? Even as my face was like still and tears were running down my face, I was so embarrassed, and I just said, I think I'm acting. Like, it was a crazy moment. But anyway, when I start to cry to the Lord, I'll tell myself, stop crying. You're not going to get more brownie points. He's not going to answer you any faster. Hush. So if you are similar in any way, I want to encourage you, because the Lord gave me some verses that are really helping me. I know they're going to help you. But again, if you're like me, it's going to take some time. It's not just, and I know that's not what you want to hear, because if you are like me, you just want the solution, right? You just, like a calculator, you just want a 1 + 1 with a 2. There, let me add a 2 to this. But we're not calculators. We're humans, right? You know this. So it's going to take some time. But happy days are here, darling. We've got the verses, and our first one, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. But seriously, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So let me give you an example or a picture to help you with that. Let's say that we're in the ocean, we're at the beach, and the person next to us is drowning. They're screaming, they're like, help, help. And you say, I'll help you get onto my back. Let me swim us to shore. And as they get on your back, they are trying to put their feet, on your shoulder. They're squeezing you out, scratching at your face, choking you. You can't help them, right? Now you're starting to drown. So you're probably going to swim under, swim away, come up and say, hey, I need you to calm down. And I need you to calm down and trust me because I'm trying to help you. And I can't help you when you're trying to save and help yourself. I need you to be weak. You may not say this like this, but I need you to be weak in this moment because I cannot help you. And that, to me, is exactly what we do with the Lord. That's what I do with the Lord, but I'm trying not to anymore. I have to learn to just be weak and to be a sheep and let him be my shepherd because he cannot help me if I'm trying to help myself in my own strength, which leads me to Psalm 23, but I'm not going to go through that. I'm hopefully going to remember to link a sermon by Kenny Baldwin. He does a phenomenal job of expanding on this psalm. It blessed me, and I just know that it's going to bless you if you watch it. But I still want to talk about the Psalms, right? So in the Psalms, there are plenty of times that we can look and see that David is calling out for help, right? And although we know who God is and what he's capable of, it's okay for us to cry out in discomfort because we're in discomfort, right? And that's what David did, right? But before I get into Psalm 69, I do want to look at John chapter 11, verses 17 through 44. I am going to jump around a bit for time's sake, but please read it in your own time, okay? So I'm going to be reading it to you. Now, when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been dead in the tomb 4 days. Verse 20, so when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. This is Martha talking to Jesus. But even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. 23, Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Then in the next verses, Mary comes and cries to him. And then in verse 33, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. Verse 34, and he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. 35, Jesus wept. 38, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. At 39, Jesus said, take away the tomb. It was a cave and a stone lay against it. 39, Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he's been dead for 4 days. And then 40, Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? 41. So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. 42. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. And 43. When he said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the man who had died came out with his hands and feet bound with linen strips and his face wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Okay, so let me tell you how God made this make sense to me for you and I and our not trusting him with our emotions. Okay, so in verse 22, Martha is saying to Jesus that she knows what God is capable of. Okay, 24, she says she knows that her brother will rise again. So, follow me. When you and I are ready to cry, but we say, none of this is going to matter, so we stop ourselves, like none of it's going to matter in heaven, like that's exactly what Martha is doing. And then in verse 33, he already knew what was going on, but he still called for Mary to come to him. and tell her. And he does the same thing with us. He calls us. He wants us to say what it is that's on our hearts. Because again, it says that he was deeply moved. So he can understand and he can empathize with what we feel. And then in 35, it says when Jesus wept, right? Well, in all of that, he stopped to weep with them. He doesn't stop and say, you know, I'm Jesus. You've already seen the miracles that I've worked. What are you crying about? You already know I got this. Why are you wasting your time? No, he doesn't do that. He makes space for the feelings and he doesn't dismiss them, and he's not going to do the same to us. He's not going to dismiss our feelings. Then it says that he was moved again, right? And then she says, Lord, by this time there's going to be an odor because it's been 4 days. But he doesn't even flinch at that. He says, did I not tell you that if you believed that you would see the glory of God? So they rolled the stone away, right? And here Martha's excuses sound like pretty good reasons, right? They sound like you and I when we get ready to cry or tell the Lord how we're feeling and we go, but I got clothes on my back, I got food in the fridge, whatever, whatever we say, like, it's the same thing. Things could be worse. It's the same thing, right? But Jesus didn't care about the smell. And Jesus doesn't care how ugly our cry is going to be. He doesn't care how bad our doubts and our whatevers, our troubles are going to stink. Because he could have rose Lazarus on the first day, but he didn't. He didn't. He could have rose him on the first day so that it wouldn't stink, but he didn't, right? He said, remove the stone. And then he said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. Then he says, Lazarus, come out. So we know that God always hears us, but we can still ask like Jesus did. When he says always, that means to me that he's continually coming back to the Father. So that's what he wants us to do. Okay. And for me, it's also saying that we have to uncallous our hearts, to roll back the stone and the things that we've learned that prevent us from being vulnerable with the Father. And then once we do that, whatever we tell him, we have to just leave it, unbind it, let it go, right? Not let it keep us bound. And then we've got to let Jesus just call those dead things out of us, those ways of being that don't serve us. He's going to call out the Lazarus in us. Unbind it and let it go. Believe, roll back the stone and see the glory of God. Believe, roll back the stone, see the glory of God. Believe. I don't know why it's a song, but I also want to say, and in that order, okay? Anyway, now I want to move on and read part of Psalm 69, starting with verse 3. I'm worn out, calling for help. My throat is parched. My eyes fail, looking for my God. So this reminds me so much of what I was feeling and maybe what you might be feeling right now. We're looking around and our house is still standing, food in our stomachs, whatever. We ain't been fired yet, but our eyes are failing to see God's help in the situation that makes us feel emotions that we're trying not to feel, that we think are useless. And then in verse 3, where he says he's worn out from calling out and his throat is parched, that to me tells me, don't stop speaking to God. Don't stop telling him how we feel, even though we know that he knows how we feel. Like David, we should not hold back. We shouldn't be ashamed. We shouldn't try to create a formula for when we should do it and how we should do it. And I don't know about you, but for me, I discovered that a lot of my hesitation in asking God for help is because I have not been able to do so in the past and in other relationships in my life. So it's an unlearning of those things and learning when to ask for help, and that we can ask for help, and that God isn't going to use this. He's not going to use it against us. We're not going to be vulnerable for nothing. We're not just being helped because he wants something from us. God says that he'll never leave us nor forsake us. So we're not going to pour out our hearts to him and then he use it against us. He's not going to get the scoop on us and then tell people about it and then disappear and then reappear when he needs our help. You may not be consciously thinking that, but I'd say ask yourself what your cries, what your patterns, so what are the patterns surrounding your cries or the prevention of cries? What happens and what has happened when you've tried or you have trusted somebody? with your emotions. And if you don't trust anybody, or you've never expressed yourself to people, and maybe you're saying, but I do express myself, I write poetry, I laugh, I'm not heartless. I'm not saying you're heartless. I'm saying you have to be able to express yourself without the fear of judgment, even from yourself. So if you've witnessed others talk about other people and their emotions that were shared with them and make small of them and make fun of them, I mean, I don't know your situation, right? But you got to trust God. You got to trust God. You got to try. 14 says, rescue me from the mire. And then 16, 17, and part of 18 says, oh Lord, do not hide from your servant. Answer me quickly, for I am in trouble. So this to me sounds like desperation. And he's saying it more than once, right? So if you're afraid to open the floodgates of vulnerability, if you've never done it before, if you're looking for the words to formulate as you're crying, don't do that. He's there. Let God be there for you. You don't have to do that. It always feels weird when I say that. You do not have to do that, right? Remember, he told them to roll back the stone before he rose Lazarus. He wanted it to air out. He wanted all the funk, right? He wants the funk. Hey, he gotta have that funk. But for real. So we have to learn to be weak. And that's the part that I don't like, right? But we have to be those sheep. I'm going to be praying for you in that. Please pray for me in that. Until next time, remember, I love you, definitely. And may God continue to bless you. The Holy Spirit help you. Jesus loves you. And you're not crazy. You're relatable.